Discover how the survival strategies we developed as children shape our present reality. Join me, Anna from Flow and Purpose, as we explore the hidden origins of our challenges and learn to rewrite our narratives for a more empowered future. We will explore the interplay between our adaptive reactions to our childhood experiences and our current issues within ourselves and relationally. I will ask you to do some applied detective work whilst I take you through the theory. From the conventional therapy point of view, the therapist would ask, what is wrong with you? The conscious connection approach is to ask, what happened to you? And how have you adapted to what happened to you? The symptoms and problems you're facing are not pathological. You're not sick or ill or bad. Symptoms and problems are survival strategies that people use to deal with unresolved trauma. Here is what Bessel from the Kolk says about the impact trauma has on the brain. The human brain is a social organ that is shaped by experience. And it is shaped in order to respond to the experience you're having. So particularly earlier in life, if you're in a constant state of terror, your brain is shaped to be on alert for danger and to try to make those terrible feelings go away. In a healthy developmental environment, your brain gets to feel a sense of pleasure, engagement, exploration. Your brain opens up to learn, to see things, to accumulate information, to form friendships. But if you're not touched or seen, whole parts of your brain barely develop, and you become an adult who is out of it, who cannot connect with other people, who cannot feel a sense of self, a sense of pleasure. If you run into nothing but danger and fear, your brain gets stuck on just protecting itself from danger and fear. As we have neuroplasticity in the brain, this is all reversible. And here I want you to look out for an upcoming video on neuroplasticity. But for now, we're looking at how it is that we are struggling with the symptoms we have, with the interpersonal or other problems that we experience. What if our current problems are in fact simply now outdated solutions to adverse childhood experiences? I want you to pause the video here and write down the problem you are currently struggling with in your life, as we're going to do some detective work here. So pause the video and write down the challenge or the problem you are facing, such as not daring to be assertive enough at work, which is resulting in you being passed over for promotion and is triggering anger and worthlessness. Or maybe you're struggling in your relationship as you're not able to set boundaries and are feeling resentful, taken for granted. Whatever it is, pause the video now and write down what it is that you're struggling with, and in the next section of the video we will explore how it is that this undesirable symptom might be in fact an old strategy to keep you safe as a child that has simply outgrown its usefulness. To illustrate in quite a dramatic way how a problem being in fact an old solution plays out, I want to introduce you to the 1980 study on adverse childhood experiences, which Dr. Felitti and his team undertook at the Kaiser Permanente Obesity Clinic in San Diego, California. The patients in the clinic were between 100 and 600 pounds overweight and wanted to reduce their weight. The program was seeing great results in weight loss, but what Dr. Felitti observed was an inexplicable trend of around half the patients, after losing significant weight, were dropping out of the program, and they were dropping out whilst losing weight. What was the reason for their self-sabotage? Dr. Felitti was committed to getting an answer, so he conducted follow-up interviews with a lot of his former patients, and he was unafraid to ask a lot of difficult questions about childhood adversity. What he discovered was staggering. Most of these patients had a history of childhood sexual abuse. For them, being overweight was not the problem. It was the solution. By being obese, they could be less likely to attract unwelcome sexual attention. Plus, eating made them feel better as they could avoid feeling the distressing emotions. Something a lot of us can relate to if we found ourselves rummaging through our fridges at night after having had a filling dinner. As these obese patients were succeeding in shedding the weight, the difficult emotions of the unresolved traumatic experiences were resurfacing. So this resulted in them quitting the program, even though their weight loss was going great. We use our survival strategies to manage unresolved trauma. That is why we overeat, overwork, abuse substances, or engage in a wide range of self-sabotaging behaviors. The study led by Dr. Felitti together with Dr. Robert Anda to develop the adverse childhood experiences study, which brought into focus the main categories of early trauma: emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, loss of a parent, domestic violence, family member with an addiction, family member depressed or suffering mental illness, or being in prison. Do any of these categories of trauma resonate with you from your own childhood? What about your parents? Maybe intergenerationally you could be affected by the traumatic experiences that your parents and ancestors had. And for more details on this, see my other videos. So very often, in order to deal with these difficult childhood experiences, we turn to shame. Shame is a mechanism of disconnecting and attacking ourselves. It is a survival strategy to protect us from losing attachment. As children, we cannot contemplate the possibility of being good in a bad situation, and as we're 100% dependent on our environment. So our survival strategy is to assume that we're bad. This is where the sense of unworthiness most often originates from. When as children we experience chronic misattunement by our attachment figures, mum and dad most commonly, we learn that we cannot trust that our basic needs will be met, and we cannot trust that we will feel loved by the adults in our lives. The outward forms could be abuse, neglect, or failure to meet our developmental needs. So if we have experienced chronic misattunement, we simply cannot stay connected to our needs and authentic feelings. This becomes too painful and intolerable. So what do? We disconnect from our authentic feelings and our needs. So it's important to realize the issue you identified that you're struggling with is not pathological. There's nothing wrong with you. It is a sensible adaptation to your early life history. Maybe in your environment it was unsafe to assert yourself. There was no room for that. Perhaps you'd have been punished or shamed. So this is where your lack of assertiveness originates from. It was a strategy you adopted to protect yourself in your environment. The growth you will experience is to develop the insight into the functionality of the so-called problem, and to reappraise the situation from your adult consciousness, so that you are able to progressively let go of such child consciousness strategies. So before we move on to consider what is adult and what is child consciousness, and how we can decipher when we operate from each one, perhaps stop the video and consider how it is that the pattern, behavior, or belief that you are struggling with, in short, your problem, how is it that it has served you in your childhood? How has it been the solution within the context of your environment? So in adult embodied consciousness, we experience ourselves as adults, not only physically, but also psychologically and emotionally. We experience ourselves as not, or at least less, dependent on others, for our sense of self-worth. We have greater capacity for being in authentic relationships. Our behaviors are not driven by adaptive survival strategies, but are arising out of our needs, feelings, and a sense of agency. In contrast, when we're stuck in child consciousness, we're bound by our adaptive survival styles. We see the world through a child's eyes. We experience subconsciously a profound fear of losing attachment relationship if we express our authentic needs and feelings. The feeling is, I can either be my authentic self or I can be in a relationship, but not both. So for the child we once were, this is a no-brainer. We abandon our authentic self and we preserve the attachment bond. As we continue these survival strategies into adulthood, we are paralyzed by our unconscious fear of relational loss. So as adults operating from child consciousness, we relate to ourselves and the world through hopelessness, lack of agency, feeling dependent on others to feel good about ourselves. So I want to end with a story about something that I recently experienced, which at first I found profoundly puzzling, but was totally explained by these dynamics that we've been considering here. I needed to plan a holiday, and as circumstances would have it, my husband would not be able to join us, so there would be just myself and the children. And whilst I'm perfectly capable of organizing a holiday, and would think I would relish the process of picking something that is totally suited to me, not having to consider the wishes of my husband or having to compromise, I was surprised to feel a sense of being lost, almost incapacitated in the indecision I felt, and I procrastinated. I even felt I could be relieved if my children would make the decision for me. Not only was I surprised by my reaction, what was stopping me from just booking a holiday? How can this simple thing be turning into a big deal? And then I realized that it had to do with a childlike lack of agency that I was experiencing at that time. Ignoring my needs and wants was something I was naturally familiar with. Now the situation was forcing me to get in touch with my wants and needs, and it felt intensely uncomfortable. As I realized that this was nothing to be ashamed of, but simply an adaptive survival strategy that had served me in the past, I was able to step into my adult consciousness whilst holding space and love for my terrified inner child. And I researched and booked a beautiful holiday. If you have resonated with what I've shared in this video, please like, subscribe, and share your own story in the comments. Thank you so much for watching.